The curse of Moonlight Meadow. Legend has it that the land on which Moonlight Meadow stands was once sacred to a tribe of Native Americans, but when the settlers arrived and claimed it for themselves, the tribe placed a curse on the land. But the developers were not deterred. They were determined to make a profit, and they believed that they could break the curse with modern technology. They brought in bulldozers and excavators, and they worked tirelessly day and night to clear the land. But as they dug deeper, they began to realize that they were not alone. Something was watching them, something that did not want them there. They heard whispers on the wind, saw shadows moving in the darkness, and felt cold fingers brushing against their skin. And then one night, they saw it. A figure tall and twisted emerged from the ground. Its eyes glowed with a fiery intensity, and its skin was black as coal. It was the embodiment of the curse, the spirit of the land that they had disturbed. And it was angry. The developers tried to run, but it was no use. The figure was too fast, too powerful. It swept them up in its embrace and dragged them down into the earth, into a world of pain and suffering that they could never escape. No one knows what happened to the developers or to the shopping center they had planned to build. The curse of Moonlight Meadow had claimed its latest victims, and it would not be satisfied until the land was returned to its natural state. Now the meadow lies empty and still, a silent reminder of the horrors that lurk beneath its surface. No one dares to disturb the peace of the land for fear of what might happen if they do. The curse of Moonlight Meadow lives on, the testament to the power of ancient spirits and the folly of those who would defy them. But some say that the curse of Moonlight Meadow is not limited to the land alone. They say that those who have been touched by the curse are forever changed, haunted by the spirits that dwell within it. There have been reports of strange occurrences in the nearby town, of people hearing whispers on the wind and feeling the cold touch of invisible hands. Some even claim to have seen the twisted figure emerging from the shadows, its eyes burning with an otherworldly light. The curse of Moonlight Meadow has spread beyond its borders, infecting the minds of those who dare to venture too close. And there are whispers that it is growing stronger, that it will not be satisfied until it has claimed all who stand in its way. Those who remember the legend of the Native American curse say that the only way to break it is to return the land to its natural state, to let the spirits rest in peace. But in a world driven by greed and profit, such a solution seems unlikely. And so the curse of Moonlight Meadow lingers, a shadowy presence that haunts the dreams of those who know its secrets. It is a reminder of the ancient forces that govern our world, and of the terrible price we must pay when we dare to defy them. The haunting of Moonlight Meadow. For as long as anyone could remember, the ghost of a woman had been seen wandering the fields of Moonlight Meadow. Her long hair flowed in the wind, and her eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. Some said she was the victim of a tragic accident. Others claimed she was a witch who had been burned at the stake. But no one could deny her presence, and then one day, a group of ghost hunters decided to investigate. The ghost hunters set up their equipment in the center of the meadow, determined to capture evidence of the woman's spirit. They had seen ghosts before, but this one was different. There was something about her that made their skin crawl, something that hinted at a deeper darkness lurking beneath the surface. As they began their investigation, strange things started to happen. The equipment malfunctioned, hammers stopped working, and the temperature dropped dramatically, but the hunters persisted, eager to capture evidence of the ghostly presence. And then they saw her. The woman emerged from the mist, her eyes burning with an otherworldly fire. But she was not alone. Behind her, a horde of spirits emerged from the shadows, their eyes fixed on the terrified hunters. The ghost hunters tried to run, but it was too late. The spirits surrounded them, trapping them in a circle of supernatural energy. They could feel the cold fingers of the ghosts brushing against their skin, hear their whispers on the wind, and then the spirits began to attack. They clawed at the hunters, tearing at their clothes, pulling at their hair. The hunters screamed in terror, but there was no escape. They were trapped in a nightmare, a world of pain and suffering that they could never escape. Days later, when the police found the ghost hunters' abandoned equipment in the center of Moonlight Meadow, they knew that something terrible had happened, but they could find no trace of the hunters themselves. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. To this day, no one knows what really happened that night at Moonlight Meadow. Some say that the ghosts of the meadow were defending their land. Others claim that they were seeking revenge for some unknown injustice. But one thing is certain, the haunting of Moonlight Meadow is not over yet, and those who dare to venture too close do so at their own peril. The haunting of Moonlight Meadow continued to terrorize the nearby town. as more and more people reported sightings of the ghostly woman and her horde of spirits. Some claimed that the ghost had become more aggressive, attacking those who dared to venture near the meadow, while others said that they had heard the spirits whispering to them in their dreams, beckoning them to come closer. The townspeople were afraid, and they begged the authorities to do something about the haunting, but the police were at a loss. They had no idea how to deal with supernatural forces, and they feared that any attempt to confront the ghost would only make things worse. And so the haunting of Moonlight Meadow continued unchecked. The meadow became a place of fear and superstition, a forbidden land that no one dared to enter. But then one day, a stranger arrived in town. He was a tall, lanky man with a mop of curly hair and a mischievous grin. His name was Jack, and he claimed to be a ghost hunter. The townspeople were skeptical at first, but Jack was charming and charismatic, and he soon won them over. He told them stories of his past exploits, of the ghost he had encountered and defeated, and he promised that he could rid Moonlight Meadow of its haunting once and for all. At first, the townspeople were hesitant. They had heard stories of ghost hunters who had met terrible fates, and they didn't want to put Jack in danger, but Jack was insistent, and he convinced them to let him try. And so Jack ventured into Moonlight Meadow, armed with his equipment and his wits. He could feel the presence of the ghosts all around him, their eyes fixed on him as he made his way through the mist. But Jack was not afraid. He had faced ghosts before, and he knew how to deal with them. He set up his equipment, and he began to communicate with the spirits, trying to understand what they wanted. And then something miraculous happened. The ghostly woman appeared before Jack, her eyes glowing with a fierce intensity. But instead of attacking him, she spoke to him. She told him of her tragic past, of how she had been wronged by the people who had once lived on the land, and she asked Jack for his help in setting things right. Jack was moved by her story, and he promised to do everything in his power to help her. And so, he worked tirelessly to uncover the truth about the woman's past, and to set her spirit free. In the end, Jack succeeded. The curse of Moonlight Meadow was lifted, and the ghosts were put to rest, and the town breathed a collective sigh of relief, grateful to Jack for his bravery and his determination. But Jack was never seen again. Some say that he had been taken by the spirits, while others claim that he had simply moved on to his next adventure. But for those who knew him, Jack would always be remembered as the hero who had saved Moonlight Meadow from its haunting. The possession of Moonlight Meadow. When the new owners of Moonlight Meadow moved in, they thought they had found their dream home. But soon after they settled in, strange things began to happen. Objects would move on their own, doors would slam shut, and the air would grow cold. And then one day, one of the family members began to act strangely. They would speak in tongues, their eyes would roll back in their head, and they would become violent. At first, they tried to ignore the strange occurrences, hoping that they would go away on their own. But as the possessions became more frequent and intense, they knew that they couldn't ignore it any longer. They sought the help of a local priest, who performed an exorcism on the family member who was affected. But it only seemed to make things worse. The possessions continued to spread, infecting other members of the family and even visitors who entered the home. They tried everything from seeking the help of other religious leaders to hiring paranormal investigators, but nothing seemed to work. The darkness that had taken hold of Moonlight Meadow was too powerful, and it was determined to claim its victims. As the family grew more desperate, they began to do their own research on the history of the land. They discovered that Moonlight Meadow had once been a site of witchcraft and black magic, and that the spirits of those who had practiced there still haunted the land. They realized that they would have to confront these spirits head-on if they wanted to reclaim their home. Armed with knowledge and determination, the family performed a ritual to banish the evil spirits from their home. It was a dangerous and risky move, but they knew that it was their only chance. The ritual was a success, and the possession stopped almost immediately, but the family knew that they could never let their guard down. They had claimed victory for now, but the darkness that haunted Moonlight Meadow was always lurking, waiting for its next opportunity to strike. Despite their victory, the family could never shake the feeling that they were being watched. They became hyper-vigilant, always looking over their shoulders and never letting their guard down. It was as if the spirits of Moonlight Meadow were waiting for their next chance to strike. As time passed, the family began to feel like they were being consumed by the darkness. They were losing sleep, constantly on edge. One day, a stranger appeared at their doorstep. He claimed to be an expert in the paranormal and offered to help them rid themselves of the darkness. They were hesitant at first, but they were desperate for a solution. The stranger conducted a series of tests and rituals, and the family began to feel a sense of hope. But their hope was short-lived. It soon became clear that the stranger had his own dark intentions. He was not there to help them, but to harness the power of the darkness for himself. The family found themselves in even greater danger than before, as the stranger's true motives were revealed. In the end, the family was forced to confront their darkest fears, and the darkness that had consumed them for so long. They battled the stranger and the spirits of Moonlight Meadow, and in the end, they emerged victorious. But the victory is bittersweet, as they realized that they could never fully escape the darkness that haunted their home. From that day on, Moonlight Meadow was known as a place of great evil, a place where the darkness could take hold of even the strongest and most resilient of people, and the family who had fought so bravely to reclaim their home knew that they would never forget the horrors they had endured. The sacrifice at Moonlight Meadow. Every year, the night of the summer solstice, a group of cultists would gather at Moonlight Meadow to perform a sacrifice. No one knew who they were or what they wanted, but the people of the town knew to stay away on that date. One year, a group of teenagers decided to sneak into the meadow to see what was going on. They were horrified to witness the ritual sacrifice of a young girl, and barely escaped with their lives. After that fateful night, the teenagers were plagued by nightmares and visions of the sacrifice. They knew they had to do something to stop the cultists and prevent another innocent life from being taken. But how could they stop a group of fanatics who seemed to possess otherworldly powers? They turned to the town's eccentric old lady, who was rumored to have knowledge of the occult. She agreed to help them, but warned them of the dangers that lay ahead. Together, they prepared for the next summer solstice, gathering protective talismans and studying ancient rituals. As the night approached, they crept into the meadow, ready to face whatever horrors awaited them. They found the cultists in the midst of their ritual, their faces twisted in ecstasy as they prepared to sacrifice another victim. But the teenagers were not alone. The old lady had brought powerful spirits with her, and they descended upon the cultists with a vengeance. In the case that ensued, the teenagers managed to free the captive girl and flee the meadow. They looked back to see the spirits and cultists locked in a fierce battle, their screams echoing across the fields. When the sun rose, the meadow was silent once again. The teenagers never spoke of what they saw that night, but they knew that they had saved a life and prevented the cultists from carrying out their twisted agenda, and they would always remember the sacrifice at Moonlight Meadow. But the darkness was not vanquished completely. The teenagers soon realized that the cultists were not the only ones with dark intentions. There were others in their town who sought power and control at any cost, and who would stop at nothing to achieve their goals. The old lady warned them that the sacrifice at Moonlight Meadow was just one manifestation of a deeper evil that permeated the land. It was up to them to continue the fight against the darkness, to protect their town and prevent the evil from spreading. So they formed a secret society, dedicated to uncovering and stopping the dark forces that threatened their community. They studied ancient texts and gathered knowledge from all corners of the world. They honed their skills and trained their minds and bodies to face any challenge. And when the next threat emerged, they were ready. They stood together, determined to protect their town from the darkness that sought to consume it. They knew that the fight would never be over, that they would always be battling against the shadows. But they also knew that they were not alone, that there were others who shared their commitment to the light. And so they faced the future with a mixture of hope and dread, knowing that the battle between good and evil would continue, but also knowing that they were prepared to face it head-on, for they were the defenders of Moonlight Meadow, and they would not rest until the darkness was vanquished once and for all. The witching hour at Moonlight Meadow. The teenagers had heard the stories about Moonlight Meadow, but they didn't believe in ghosts or curses. They were just looking for some excitement on a boring summer night. So they grabbed flashlights and headed out into the dark, their footsteps crunching on the dry grass. As they approached the abandoned house, they heard a rustling sound coming from inside. It sounded like someone was moving around. They exchanged nervous glances, but none of them wanted to admit that they were scared. "Let's go in," one of them said, trying to sound brave. They pushed open the door and stepped inside. The air was musty and thick with dust. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, and the furniture was covered in sheets. It looked like no one had been inside for years. But as they moved further into the house, they began to realize that something was wrong. The floorboards creaked beneath their feet. and they heard strange whispers coming from the shadows. It was as if the house was alive, and it didn't want them there. But suddenly, one of the teenagers let out a scream. He had felt something brush against his leg, something cold and slimy. The others spun around, their flashlights shining wildly, but they couldn't see anything. "Let's get out of here," another one shouted. They turned to run, but the door was blocked. It wouldn't budge, no matter how hard they pushed. They were trapped. And then they heard a voice, a whisper that seemed to come from all around them. "You should not have come here." Said, "This is our home now." The teenagers huddled together, their hearts pounding. They knew they were in trouble, that something was coming for them. And then they saw it, a dark shape moving towards them in the darkness. It was humanoid, but its features were blurred and indistinct. It was like looking at a shadow come to life. They tried to run, but it was too late. The shadowy figure engulfed them, pulling them into a world of darkness and pain. They screamed, but their cries were swallowed up by the void. No one ever saw them again. Some say they were taken by the ghosts of Moonlight Meadow, while others believe they were sacrificed to some dark force. But one thing is certain, no one ever goes near that house on the night of the full moon. The witching hour at Moonlight Meadow is a time of fear and dread, when the shadows come to life and anything can happen. Rumors about the disappearance of the teenagers spread quickly through the small town. Parents warned their children to stay away from Moonlight Meadow, and the local authorities launched an investigation. But despite their efforts, no trace of the teenagers was ever found. It was as if they had simply vanished into thin air. Some people began to believe that the old house was cursed, that anyone who entered it would never come out again. Years passed, and the story of the missing teenagers faded into legend. But there were still those who remembered, who knew that something evil lurked in the shadows of Moonlight Meadows. One night, a group of college students decided to test their bravery and explore the abandoned house. They had heard the stories, but they didn't believe them. They were older now, wiser, and they thought they could handle whatever lay ahead. But as they stepped into the darkness of the old house, they felt a chill run down their spines. It was as if the air itself was alive, pulsing with malevolent energy. They heard whispers, felt cold fingers brushing against their skin, and knew that they had made a terrible mistake. They tried to leave, but the door was locked. Panic set in, and they began to realize that they were trapped. And then they saw it, a shadowy figure moving towards them in the darkness. It was the same creature that had taken the teenagers all those years ago, and it hungered for more. The students screamed and fought, but it was no use. The creature was too powerful, too otherworldly. It dragged them into the void, into a world of darkness and pain, where their screams echoed for eternity. No one ever found the bodies of the college students, just like they had never found the bodies of the teenagers. And so the legend of Moonlight Meadow continued, a warning to all who would dare to test their bravery against the unknown.